Hi, I'm KS Garner, and you're listening to the Solo Nerdbird podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with the creator and writer Jacob Cohen and the comics illustrator Raymond Griffith here to promote issues 0 and issue 1 of their series Astounding Tales. Welcome, Jake. Welcome, Ray.
Hi, I'm Jake. Well, thanks for having us, Kayla. Much appreciated. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and I'm Raymond. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me, you two. But outside my introduction, who is Jacob Cohen and Raymond Griffith, and what are you two about individually?
Like who? Wow, that's a big question. We're getting like deep right off the bat. Who am I? Well, I'm a Long Island native. I live in Long Beach, New York. I grew up in Merrick, New York, like just an exit away on the Parkway. I'm a huge fan of like genre fiction. Since I was a little kid, I've loved comic books. Also, since I was a little kid, first comic I ever read was I bought the first comic. If you want to maybe just vamp, I have the first comic I ever bought.
Of course he does.
I repurchased them recently, actually. So these aren't the original copies. They're somewhere in my mom's house in very poor condition. But this is the first comic I ever owned, as I knew I bought a version of it. Can I get this? The background killing it?
Yeah, the background is eating it.
Oh, man. Well,
there's a little bit of it, yeah.
That's it's world's finest 302. There's a dude who's like the world's greatest actor who's like about to die, so he fools like Superman and Batman into like helping him and going against each other as like his greatest role ever. And this is the first comic I ever bought. And it's X-Men 286, Uncanny 286. It's a Jim Lee cover, Wilson Terriers. When you could still buy them on the newsstand in my hometown of Merrick at what's the name of the store? TMO. At TMO, the bodega, when you used to get comics off the rack. And that is like one of the reasons I love comics. So I'm a huge Uncanny fan, like Chris Claremont's Uncanny. A lot of Long Island stereotypes. I grew up playing lacrosse. I later played in college and coached lacrosse for a little bit in coached college lacrosse. And I like Billy Joel. Like I know every Billy Joel song by heart. Till I left Long Island, I didn't realize that was like a weird thing that not everyone like does or know. Like we sang Billy Joel songs in like elementary school and stuff. Like, yeah. I don't know what else. I don't know.
Great at karaoke.
I'm not good. I can't carry a tune. Yeah, no beat. Can't carry a tune. I'm tone deaf. Like in football practice when you do jumping jacks. Like I was always out of sync doing the jumping jacks. Like any part of a concert where you clap, I try not to clap along because I'm definitely going to be out of like sync, out of beat with everyone else clapping, and I don't want to like F people up. So like I'll dance around, like I'll get down at a show, but if there's any like clapping in unison, I try because it's just going to screw other people up around me. I don't know. Like I got 3 siblings. I got 2 guinea pigs, Victor Von Doom and Barristan Selmy. It's a big question. Like, who am I? Like, I'm gonna be like thinking of that tonight. Like, who am I? Like, you've caused like an existential like crisis for me.
Well, do you do any other comics writing or of that sort as well? Do you want to talk more about your?
Okay. So the only published work I've done before this is. I wrote a comic for my brother-in-law who teaches a class on geology at the University of Wisconsin. He's a doctor of geology. Hey, Steve. And so he commissioned a comic for his geology class. Like he teaches like the intro geo, like whatever. Like his whole thing is like getting kids into college students into science besides the research he does and stuff like that. So I did like a sci-fi comic for him. But primarily, most of my writing is actually academic, like writing. I finished, I have an undergrad and MA in film theory. I just finished my MA this past fall, or they accepted my thesis finally. And so I am done. I got my digital the diploma finally. So the real one is in the mail. So I finally completed that. So like most of my like writing that I do is actually like nonfiction writing, like mostly, you know, kind of film theory stuff. Like my thesis was on John Hughes and the American suburb and kind of the influences of that stuff and kind of the origins and all that. So unfortunately, like, yeah, a lot of too much of my writing has been like, you know, like nonfiction. Yeah, not much. Yeah, I try to make it fun. That's why I do film theory, but as most I can. So it's definitely a pleasure working with Ray in terms of that. But visual storytelling, I've always been into, whether it's, you know, motion pictures, film, comics. Like I do like reading prose and stuff like that. But for me, it's always been visual storytelling. And comics versus like film, it doesn't really, obviously they're very different mediums, but I don't really have a preference. To me, they're kind of what would be a good analogy, you know, they're still, you know, there's still sequential storytelling. It's just that the sequence in a film is a sequence that's going so fast, it's giving the illusion of motion. You know, we're not capturing real motion, we're just showing sequences, you know, frames rapid enough that it causes the illusion of motion. So they're both kind of the same difference. It's just one is a faster sequence or whatever, you know. And, you know, I can't make Ray draw 60 frames per second or, you know, whatever.
You couldn't afford it.
So yeah, I don't know. Is that all right? I hope I answered the question sort of. Like I guess it's kind of a big question. Who are you? Like, I don't know. I feel like now I should be paying you or something, or at least putting like my insurance card down or something, like for like the session.
Oh, so what about you, Ray? What are you about?
Okay, so my name is Raymond Griffith. I'm an artist from Oklahoma, and since I was 16, I've actually been a caricature artist. So I worked at a theme park, and then expanded out doing my own business, doing conventions, fairs, festivals, all that sort of thing. But, you know, deep down, I always had a love for comics. I don't have my very first one sitting next to me. You know, unfortunately, I didn't bring that. No visual aids for this one. But, you know, it's something I've always wanted to do, and I kind of took a look at myself right around the time the world shut down and there stopped being conventions. And I said, you know, you always wanted to do this, and you never have. Why not? And so I started doing some work with smaller anthologies. I've got a few published stories now, including such volumes as Screams Heard Round the World from Hellcat Press, the Border X anthology, the Bebop, and I know I'm forgetting someone, Oneshi Press's Origins anthology, and a few others like that sort of ilk. And then kind of ran into Jake by chance. I don't know if you want to know a few more details about that story in just a second or not.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna ask how the collaborative effort, how that came to be. That's a little bit later. So yeah,
it's also kind of, you know, listening to you know, Ray's story, that like I a little bit have to thank the pandemic for, you know, then him being like collaborating with me. It's like a weird thing to feel like positive about, you know, like thank goodness that global pandemic hit so that like Ray could like kind of think about his goals and then I could capture him in my grasp. Make this comic book.
Okay, so what is Astounding Tales about?
Okay. Well, in terms of just like plot wise, it's about a tween girl, Billy Potts, and thematically, or tonally rather, it's you know, a love letter, a throwback to the Silver Age comics of Stan and Jack, but a contemporary kind of retelling. So very much in terms of plot, it's more contemporary anxieties, more contemporary issues. So as opposed to like Silver Age comics about kind of the nuclear age, the Cold War, which unfortunately in like the news like very recently has gone from like nostalgia to like contemporary in like the last like 2 to 3 weeks. Like issue 3 we have some like Cold War nostalgia stuff, and like I said, and like that script that like was written like, I don't know, like a while ago, like Ray, like it was like a few months ago, right, is now that like there's like a cold open that's like a total Cold War like nostalgia thing that's like now weirdly contemporary, unfortunately, because of like current events and stuff like that. But yeah, so like a lot of in terms of like the plot devices and stuff like that and themes are contemporary, like the environment, artificial intelligence, kind of what does it mean to be human, kind of that type of stuff. So there's also a little bit of cyberpunk influence in there as well. And then a lot of the design work is definitely like on in terms of Ray as well, or definitely Ray, and also like panel layout in terms of page layout. And then a lot of stuff with like colors and panels and stuff that's just like way over my head. If you want to take the ball.
Yeah, I was gonna say, overall, it's sort of a love letter to the medium. You know, it's everyone who feels any bit of nostalgia for the way comics used to smell and look and all of that sort of thing. We're trying to bring that back, but maybe a little more geared towards a modern audience. So not quite as cheesy. I mean, a little cheese, but you know, the good kind, not necessarily the stale Velveeta from the bottom of the box.
Yeah, definitely. Like my captions are kind of purple or verbose, like in the tradition of like Chris Claremont, or going back to Stan. Like I definitely that's kind of my Jimmy Jam. So like you'll definitely catch that in like kind of the captions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was reading what Ray had sent me, and I was like, it's weird that you say that you wanted the feel and the smell of it, because I can actually, when I was reading, I was like, I could smell these pages. How vintage they are. I could smell them.
That's
Are you saying they stink?
It's just like smelling. It's like smelling a physical book almost. That's what I get the feeling of.
Like a comic store that's like got filled with like back issues, like that that weird old newsprint smell. That's kind of close to my heart. It's definitely.
You wouldn't know this, but the actual physical books we printed for our first Kickstarter were actually done on genuine newsprint, and believe me, it's not cheap doing that, but we wanted that authenticity, so that's the nice thing about it.
I think that there's a certain grain and texture to it, and so we went out of our way. That was a distinct choice. That was not by accident to print on newsprint.
Well, can either of you elaborate on your creative process on Astounding Tales? So I guess, Jake, it just been a thought in your head to flushing it out as a complete work and working with Ray and I guess with Arrows maybe, and to now promoting just these first two issues, issue 0 and issue 1 now.
Well, like the original like genesis, there was kind of two kind of genesis points, or like I guess like kind of little seeds that I grew out of. One is I used to send scripts, and when they were accepted, 2000 AD would accept like 4-page scripts. They're called future shocks, basically like kind of a Twilight Zone-y, like a weird twist happens at the end. So at the start of the pandemic, so I guess this is also something we could thank the global pandemic for. 2080 stopped accepting those submissions. So I had a 4-pager that I kind of liked. And then Ray and I linked up through Comics Collab on Reddit, and he liked the script so much so, which I appreciate very much. He threw in terms of the commission, I commissioned him for 4 pages. He threw in a fish splash page. I don't know if that's maybe bad for business. Like, you'd not want me to tell people, like, hey, that Jake guy got a free page. Like, what's up, bro?
Not the most financially wise decision I ever made, but it worked out.
And so we enjoy working with each other, and then to be able to kind of fund the printing and the shipping of a full size issue number 1, we did the Kickstarter, which was successful, and we could do Kickstarter for issue 2, and then also in terms of the writing of issue 1, and also issue 0. During the course of the start of the pandemic, I read a Jack Kirby biography by Mark Evanier. So in terms of doing like an earnest take on the superhero genre, because I've spoken about this a few times, that the comics I kind of grew up in, you could kind of date me when I was a little kid by the comics I showed you, is really kind of like the dark, grim, gritty like era of comics, or also like a lot of people doing deconstructionist like takes on comics, the Watchmen, the Dark, like I love Dark Knight Returns, like I'm of the time I was raised in, but I was very much like, enough is enough. You get a lot of that Venom, Punisher, Wolverine, like, enough is enough. When Batman had that weird, or Azrael had that weird Batman suit, that's all when I was a little kid. So like, that's a cool take on comics, but to me, I guess it depends kind of when you were you were a kid, when you were growing up. For me, an earnest take on the genre is refreshing. You know, it's like kind of a breath of fresh air. So that's what we kind of wanted to do tonally with this series.
Okay, well, how difficult was world building for you, Jake? Like, how did you manage to create a world that is totally your own and still integrate your influences into it, but maintain that Astounding Tales is yours in your world and not someone else's?
Well, I mean, in terms of design, I have to give a lot of credit to Ray. So some things are, you know, maybe specific, but a lot of stuff like, let's say the monster in issue 0, I said, I need a kaiju that attacks the city. And I think the work speaks for itself in terms of, I think you could see the enthusiasm and the joy in it, rather than me being like, Ray, you're like my like art robot, draw this thing, you know, or even going as far as like making stick figure layouts. Like, that's kind of like, that'd be like a lot of hubris on my part. Like, I have this like great artist and I'm like, let me make these stick figure layouts to tell you how this panel is going to look. It's like, come on, dude, like, you know, slow your roll. So, yeah, in terms of like the design, so a lot in terms of like how the characters speak, a little bit like a Woody Allen or Kevin Smith movie, like a lot of the characters kind of like speak like me a little bit. But so like in terms of that, like, you know, in terms of like the politics of things, like it's not didactic, but I definitely like, we put it on Front Street, but a lot of like, in terms of like, when you say world building, the design of the world, and like kind of the textures and all that stuff. And especially like the colors and all that is definitely, if Ray, you want to speak to that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. So there is a lot of reference at play with what we are doing. So, you know, going back just a bit, there was a lot of research that went into designing the world and the characters, seeing how things were done, the way panels were laid out. But then the next step is, of course, taking that and remixing it. You don't want to just straight copy anything that you're seeing. You want to take it and make it gestalt, really. So, you know, we have a character, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but we have a character who's sort of a half-man, half-machine monster in the first issue. And rather than look at any one direct reference, I took a lot of personal things that I've seen, you know, references from The Thing, references from Alien, references from the comics themselves, and then kind of combined it with the actual prompt that Jake had given me, which...
do you remember? I think you said like body horror or something.
Yeah, you said body horror, but you had a specific character you referenced as well, and I'm suddenly blanking on his name. It's
been a while, but yeah, I'm trying to think.
So I didn't look at him at first, and that's part of the trick. I don't look directly at the references first. First I come up with my own idea, then I go back to the source material and see what I can push, pull, and take to the next level to make it true to where we're coming from.
Okay, so I guess, Jake, before you found Ray, what was your experience with searching for collaborators? And how did you know that Ray and Arrows were the right people for this project? And then Ray, how did you know that this, like, what part of what Jake pitched to you really brought you on board for this project?
Well, I guess in terms of like being a writer, the time commitment is really such a vast kind of when you have limited resources, finding someone to collaborate with, and rightfully so, like in terms of the artist, there is a difference in terms of like time commitment and like actual like physical like man hours. So if you're an unpublished writer, there is that little bit of a hurdle of being like, hey man, like I'm not a flake, like we could get this done, like let's, you know, because there is a little bit of a weird dynamic in that regard. So I think that's kind of the biggest hurdle if you're an unpublished writer, to try to, you know, get an artist on board to commit to be like, hey man, like this will work out, like we could do this. Because there's, I guess, a little bit of a leap of faith, you know. So in terms of like the Thelma Louise moment, I got Ray to grab my hand as like we hit the pedal on that car. So is it that, I guess, what was that? That was the question, right? How to find that collaboration or whatever.
Yeah, like how did you know? Like how did
I know he was the one?
So I was like, so how was your experience with searching for collaborators, and how did you know Ray?
Well, unfortunately, like whether, like actually, you know, maybe just a couple months. Like I've definitely had like different collaborations, both in terms of willing to pay in terms of commissions and not, where people have been flaky. So in terms of like Ray's definitely like, he's committed to the cause. Like he's down. Like we're gonna like, he's in it. And even his wife helps. She's the voice of Billy Potts in the Kickstarter. Cool. So it's like all hands on deck in that regard. So I guess in terms of when you're starting out in any kind of collaborative art form, especially when you're like kind of limited in resources. So like frank, people are, working for either free or not a lot of dough or whatever. And I guess, so this would go for any kind of collaborative art. Whether you want to be in a band, put on a play, shoot a film, to get people that are committed and you yourself to be committed, and be all in. So I guess finding, and I don't know, you could even expand that outside of collaborative art forms, but anything that you're doing that's like just basically mostly passion. So I guess even you want to open a restaurant, a small, a small business, whatever, something where you're like asking people to like pitch in on the promise of this producing something. Is kind of, that's kind of the devil in the details, is to like get people to buy into kind of the vision of what you're doing. And I guess, this is the specific example,
He got me. Well, I was going to say, from my perspective, I've done a little collaboration, obviously, with several different writers, several different projects. And I think what spoke to me about this specific pitch was the clear vision of what was happening, and well, if I'll be really frank, the fact that it had a giant monster was a big plus, because I was really feeling like drawing a giant monster. But it was the action and the excitement, because, and I'll say this, not in reference to anyone who I have worked with, but several people whose pitches I've not gone for, people have a tendency to forget a comic is a visual medium, and they just want to have characters in a room talking. And there are comics that do that very successfully. I'm not saying it can't be done, but that is not what I enjoy about the medium. That is not what I enjoy drawing. If we're doing a comic, I want to draw some action, gosh dang it.
I was also speaking to that in terms of like eras of comics or just storytelling in general. Like we're definitely not doing decompressed storytelling. Like some of the inspirations in terms of like the Galactus trilogy, where like every page is like multiple concepts, multiple characters, and the other in terms of issue 1 was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not in terms of like plot or anything like that, but just like, again, like that kind of breakneck, like things are happening, we're going. We're meeting new characters, meeting new concepts, we're meeting new ideas. We're not writing to the trade. We're not writing to the trade paperback.
Yeah, as I was reading it, it was moving. The pace was pretty quick, and it wasn't a lot of talking in it, which I kind of appreciated. I'm not when I read these comics that people send me, there is a lot of talking. I mean, it helps move the scene along as well, but I really appreciated that it wasn't a whole lot of dialogue. Things were just kind of happening, and it was explained, or I guess it progressed as the panels moved on, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, and it's, I guess people were talking when they needed to, which I appreciated as well. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of effects budget, raise my special effects budget, So and I guess in terms of genre storytelling, I think maybe if you're someone who you just working in other genres, maybe you want to do like a rom-com or a character piece or a character study. Like if we're doing genre, specifically the superhero genre, a little cyberpunk kind of sprinkled in there, like, yeah, like why not? Like it's not question why, but why not? And then also kind of in terms of as the writer, like, hey, Ray, what do you want to draw? Like, what are you into? Like, what do you dig? And like, what do you hate? I think for any writer, that's like a big thing to know also, like what does the artist don't, and also it's not just, I think it'll be a better product in the end. It's not just about being like a cool person or willing to compromise. I think now, to be fair,
I was very clear. I don't love drawing vehicles, and issue 2, the entire back half is in a like an SUV, or not an SUV, but like a Hummer. So I think I must have made him a little mad at me at some point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, you're right. Take a Kayla. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, yeah, we do. There's some talking, and there's an issue too. There's a chunk where there's just two people talking, where it's like an indie film. There is a part of issue two, but it's
good though.
It's deep. Yeah, it's getting to the thematic. Like we had to, but then there's punchy after that. There's a lot of punchy after that.
Yeah, there's dialogue in there where there needs to be dialogue, and then the dialogue isn't where there doesn't need to be dialogue, if that makes sense. So like I said, the pace of it is quick, which is nice, and the dialogue is only there when it needs to be there.
Yeah, it's a visual medium, show not tell.
So a question for the both of you, it doesn't really matter who goes first, but what advice would you offer to other creators? It can be in comics, it can be film, it can be whatever you feel like is appropriate, that you wish someone would have told you when you first started. So it can, like I said, it can be in film, it can be in comics, it can be just like business stuff or anything like that. But you wish someone would have told you that you learned along the way when you first started.
Oh, I hit the wrong button on the Kickstarter. I launched it early. That's probably that
was the maddest I've ever been at you. that night, I was like, no,
because there's like a preview button to like not launch it, and then I got confused.
It really worked out though. We launched 3 days early, but people were there for us. We got the word out immediately, and I think we were funded within 2 days, weren't we?
Yeah.
Oh,
no.
cool.
Yeah. It was a interesting night though.
Well, I guess this is not really a lesson, but just. I think it's just important everyone know that that everyone's first draft sucks. I guess that you just got it is a craft. Like you got to just kind of do it. So I guess similar to art, but I mean I guess that everyone has a different kind of ceiling, but you have to be dedicated to your craft. So yeah, don't be if it just comes out kind of if your first draft ain't that great or the first story you write or whatever, keep plugging away,
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say, I think I could give a lot of advice, specifically art related, about fundamentals and practice and all that. But I think relevant to this comic, something I have learned throughout the process of it is if I'm having a really hard time with a panel and it's giving me so much trouble, it's because I need to rethink that panel and how I've staged it. And going back, I wish I could have told myself, because there are a few panels where I forced myself to go with what I had done instead of trying to revisit what I was doing. And I think those are probably some of the weaker images in the book. Whereas with the issue I'm working on now, I've gone back on panels that I didn't like, wiped the board, erased it, and tried again, and it's exactly what I wanted. So that would be my advice.
That's much better than what I said. I want to take back what I said. You know what? Bray got me thinking that the important part of writing is the not writing part. That like a lot of the ideas come just for me personally if I'm like exercising or doing some kind of running or in the shower. I guess everyone's different. You get inspiration different ways, whatever. But a huge part of writing is the not writing part. That's where ideas happen. They happen online at the grocery store while you're taking a shit. That's when, that's like a big part of writing. So I guess, my previous thing was very adamant that writing happens when you write, but also that a lot of it happens when you're not writing is when you're writing.
Yeah, mine happens when I'm about to go to sleep. I'm trying to go to sleep.
I don't remember that shit. I know some people can remember. I don't. That's if it happens right. And then I'll think about it the next day. No, man, I had something. It's gone. It's gone to the ether.
All right. Well, my last question for you two is, what is your idea of success? So I asked that to pretty much everyone, that if you're not getting regular paychecks from a full-time job or making consistent revenue from your art, you're considered a failure in a way. So many of us will put our dreams and projects on the back burner or give them up altogether because this career path can be highly intimidating and competitive. So what is your idea of quote unquote success?
Okay. Well, back when I used to coach lacrosse, like I used to use the John Wooden's measure of success. That success is his quote in like his big book of axioms, that the success is doing the best based on like the talent you were allotted or whatever. That's a paraphrase, but basically like you did the best based on like what your potential is. Like your measure of success isn't like based on anyone else's. So that in life, that's just kind of the definition of a success that I go by is John Wooden's definition of success, that like you're your own measure of success. But in terms of the comic, I view us, I would say in terms of like, we're able to publish a comic and like distribute it and like it exists. It's like a physical fucking thing that is to me like a huge, like spike the football. But then like another is, you know, I'm not satisfied with that. I would like to, you know, if I eventually, you know, it would be wonderful to be financially compensated for the comic and then also use it to be able to springboard to make more comics and like different other, like tell more stories. So like right now, I would still say like, yes, we are successful, but also there is, we're still reaching, we're still plugging away. We haven't spiked the football yet, but there's like a physical fucking copy like is awesome to me, you know? So
got to get your bleeps ready for this one.
I'm sorry. It's like, you know, I don't know how other people feel about that, but like I cry when I see it, like first see it. Like I made a comic book, you know, like because I guess also things like like when you first discover that someone writes or draws a comic, like when you're a kid, is like a weird thing. You're like, someone made this. Like I don't know. I guess it happens to every kid with whether it's TV shows or video games or really just products in general. That like, oh, like someone produced that. You know, like even like someone designed a cereal box. Like, I'm sure kids just like think like, oh, they just plop out of the factory. Oh, no, someone designed Tony the Tiger, like, you know, some dude somewhere, you know, so that like this mysterious alchemy that like makes a thing called a comic book. Like I did that thing, like with the help of Ray. Like I didn't do it alone. Like it would just be stick figures, Dixon Pac-Man if it was me. But like Ray, God bless him, with his two freaking hands, bringing this thing to life, and like it's a thing now. Yeah, you know what? Ray made a human being and a comic book. So I mean,
really,
he's like godlike. he makes life. He makes comic books.
Yeah. To be fair, I didn't do most of the work in that process. I don't know if you're clear on how this works, but anyway. All right. I also wanted to briefly say, I come from a very unique perspective in that, unlike a lot of artists, I've actually made a living doing art for almost my entire life. And actually, I've recently transitioned away from making money for my art because it's success, quote unquote, but it feels like it takes so much of the joy out of it. And I was so soul crushed. 15 years of just doing things for other people that they wanted instead of what I wanted to do. I don't view that as success anymore. What I want, don't get me wrong, if I could make $1 million drawing what I want, I would take it in a heartbeat. But I view success more so as the recognition from others that says, hey, you did a cool thing, we liked it. And that's it. That's all I know. That's all I want.
We made a thing.
All right. Well, is there anything else that either of you want to touch on about Astounding Tales, the series that I may have missed?
I don't know. Issue 0 and 1 out now. If you go to Ray's funnyfigs.com, you can read issue 0 for free. It's
funnyfigs.com/astounding tales to be exact.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank the creator and writer Jacob Cohen and the comics illustrator Raymond Griffith for joining me in promoting the series Astounding Tales, issues 0 and 1. Issue 2 will be launching in late spring on Kickstarter. If you follow either one of them, they'll let you know when it pops up. I highly recommend our listeners to give the series Astounding Tales a look, share, and purchase if they can. All of Ray's and Jake's socials alongside links to purchase will be listed in this episode's details for those who are interested. And again, the Kickstarter link will be available at a later date. Again, I'm K.S. Garner, and you have been listening to the Solo Nerdbird Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.